Welcome to the Golden State Media Concepts Travel Podcast, the show that gives you advice on everything travel. We explore places you've always wanted to go, as well as giving tips for traveling in those places. We'll give you advice on the best sites for travel tips, information, and discounts. Join us as we travel the world, explore cultures, and meet new people. The Golden State Media Concepts Travel Podcast has got you covered.
Hello and welcome to the GSMC Travel Podcast, brought to you by GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Stacy, and today we are talking about Lima, Peru. So, Peru obviously is in South America, but it's one of those South American countries that people don't necessarily know much about and probably couldn't necessarily pick out on a map. And for me, the only thing I really knew about Peru was a person group, which is, I'm sure, showing my age, a Disney child. But Lima, Peru is the capital of Peru. And Peru is part of the Pacific Pumas, a political and economic group of countries along Latin America's Pacific coast that share common trends of positive growth, stable macroeconomic foundations, improved governance, and an openness to global integration. So it's sort of one of the up-and-coming, I guess you would say, South American countries. It ranks very high in social freedom, and it has the third lowest homicide rate in South America. And I felt that's sort of, I wanted to point that out just because I feel like a lot of people feel nervous about traveling in parts of Central and South America because the only thing you hear about certain countries on the news is really terrible of, different paramilitary groups sort of staging coups or kidnapping people or what have you. And that's, of course, not the case for even one whole country in all the places. But it feels like if you don't specifically look up the information yourself, you're only going to have this really negative idea of any of the Latin American countries. And that's definitely not the case, and not the case for Peru. Third lowest homicide rate in all of South America. So that's rather reassuring. Lima is the capital of Peru, as I said, and it's the largest city in Peru. But until very recently, until maybe the past 20 or 30 years, it wasn't even really considered a place to sort of stop on its own. It was considered a sort of, you have to go through to get to where you want, which is if you wanted to go and see the ruins of Machu Picchu, or if you wanted to go and see the Nazca Lines, there wasn't really any other way to get in there except to fly into Lima and then get to where you really wanted to go through there. But people didn't really see Lima as a place to go by itself, just sort of a passing through sort of city, but that's changed in the past few decades, I guess. Lima is also the home of the National University of San Marcos, which was founded on May 12, 1551, making it the oldest continuously functioning university in the Americas. Again, Peru it's surprising. It's not one of the Latin American countries you hear too much about, but it seems rather stable at the moment, which is possibly why you don't hear too much about it, because you kind of really only hear the bad things, especially if you only get your information through the news. News tends to pick the most sensational things to showcase, and that tends to often not be positive. So Peru sounds very interesting, but also very safe and reassuring. It's got two distinct seasons. And because it is in the southern hemisphere, its seasons are sort of opposite from ours in North America. So its summer is from December to April, and its winter is from June through October. And if you're listening, you're probably like, I think you missed a couple of months in there. You're right, because May and November are both considered more transition months, where there's a more dramatic warm to cool transition. They're not really considered one season or the other. Peru is also a very strong melting pot country, which I feel most of the Latin American countries are, just because of their history, which we won't go into. But it's got a lot of European, Andean, African, and Asian cultural influences. And the first three, I kind of could have guessed. I maybe couldn't have told you the name Andean, but I kind of could have guessed that there would have been a sort of European and then a sort of indigenous something culture. And then a lot of Latin American countries do also have African influences from descendants of African slaves and that whole thing. Peru is actually on the Pacific coast, so it's a little far from the very little I remember of like the triangle trade, but it doesn't surprise me too much that there would be strong African cultural influences in Peru. What does surprise me is the Asian influences. And that is starting in, I think I saw the 60s or so, where there started being a lot of Asian immigrants coming over to do work in labor and on farms. And so you started seeing more and more Asians in the country, which of course then led to more and more influences, as tends to happen just in any country, really, if you start getting a large enough amount of immigrants. So, for example, I'm from California. We also have a large number of Asians and different Asian ethnicities. So depending on where you live in California, it may be more Korean or more Vietnamese or more Chinese, but just a large number of Asians in general, which actually threw me off because I thought that was all of, the United States, and not the case. But Peru itself also has a good number of Asian influences. And this one, and this is sort of why I'm really excited about Lima, is that it's known as the gastronomical capital of the Americas, which I'm not a foodie. And I think I've said either on this podcast or another that I'm actually really, really picky. And I am really amazingly picky. It's like my taste buds did not really develop past the age of like 6. And there's not much that I eat now that I haven't eaten then. Or rather, I should say there's not really anything I've added to my repertoire of food I am willing to eat. There was, I think sour cream was something, and it was a big fight with my family to get me to even try it, because in my head, dairy is not supposed to be sour. So if you're trying to get me to try something called sour cream, I'm immediately like, no. But then like everything else, I don't like a lot of condiments on things. I really only like ketchup. When I used to go to Subway, I didn't want like any of the toppings. It was just like, put the meat and the cheese and you're done. So I'm a really picky person. And even in America, for me, finding things to eat is hard. And so having a place known as the gastronomical capital of the Americas would not sound exactly like the place I probably would want to go. But because it is known as the gastronomical capital of the Americas, rather conversely, I'm more like, oh, I have to try that. You're known so much that you're the gastronomical, and not even the gastronomical capital of just Peru, or the gastronomical capital of South America, of the Americas entirely, evidently, is Peru. And it's actually on the list of like top 50 restaurants in the world or what have you. It has 3, and no country has more than 3, but based off of the rankings of their specific 3, Peru kind of ranks the highest points-wise, because it's got a restaurant at number 4, Central, a restaurant at number 13, Maido, and a restaurant at number 30, Astrid and Gaston. I apologize for my accent there. And it's just like, for you to have 3 in the top 50 and no other country has more than 3, and you rank kind of the highest even with your 3, you must be doing something right. So maybe I myself could find something to eat there, as slim of a chance as that sounds. But I have to give this a try. When you are that highly rated as to be the gastronomical capital of the Americas, I can't just ignore that aspect of it. So we're going to take a short break, and when we come back, we will be talking more about Peru and its gastronomical wonderfulness. So stay tuned.
Do you want to be healthier, yet you just don't know what to do? All these shows telling you this and that, but nothing seems to work. Well, listen close. Golden State Media Concepts has got something great for you. The Health and Wellness Podcast dedicated to workout trends, healthy eating habits, diet, and everything about healthy living. Join us in our banters as we help you not just live life to the fullest, but live it to the healthiest.
Welcome back to the GSMC Travel Podcast. Before our break, we were talking about Peru and how it's known as the gastronomical capital of the Americas. And that's not just by restaurant critics. A national poll actually found that 39% of Peruvians themselves consider gastronomy to be the principal source of national pride of their country, above even those who consider the ruins of Machu Picchu to be the pride, which was at 36%. So, U.S. food critic Eric Asimov has described Peruvian cuisine as an exemplar of fusion cuisine due to its long multicultural history. And we mentioned that earlier, how it's got all the strong influences from Europe and Africa and Asia and the indigenous people as well. So, were I to go to Lima, I would actually want to check out this place called the Gastronomy House as my destination. The Gastronomy House is a bit kind of like it sounds. It's not, well, I guess not how it sounds, because I guess if you say Gastronomy House, it kind of sounds like either a really awesome restaurant or a cooking school or something, but that's not what it is. It's actually a museum where you can tour through over 500 years of history and ancient wisdom, up to the fusion of flavors of more modern times and the influence of other cultures on Peruvian cuisine. And thankfully, it's also free of admission, so you can save your money for trying the different foods that I'm sure you'll be very, very hungry to try after going through 500 years of Peruvian cuisine. Peru also has a festival called Mistura, which is celebrated every September, and it's their gastronomical festival, or their greatest gastronomical festival. They might have more than one, where it showcases the best of Peruvian cuisine. So this has clearly become something that Peruvian culture is proud of, and the Peruvian government is proud of, and something that they want to sort of emphasize. Therefore, I would be remiss if I did not go and try it myself while I was there. However, if you're thinking, okay, that's great, but I'm sure Peruvian cuisine encompasses more than one thing because it's a national cuisine. Yes, that's absolutely right. And beyond the three, ranked restaurants that I mentioned earlier, there are, of course, a number of different Peruvian restaurants, but the type I'd be interested to try would be chifa restaurants. So chifa is based on Chinese Cantonese elements fused with traditional Peruvian ingredients and traditions. It's sort of like the poster child for the whole fusion Peruvian cuisine that they're so proud of and so well known for. So we mentioned, of course, earlier that there are a number of Asian immigrants to Peru. And when they came, they of course brought their culture and of course wanted to make the traditional foods that they had eaten at home to sort of bring in that sense of the home country, but found that they couldn't always get the ingredients that they were used to, because at that time, if Peru didn't have it, it was more cost prohibitive, to ship it over. And so they had to learn to make do with other similar or not similar ingredients. So chifa has actually become one of the most popular types of food in Peru. There are thousands of chifa restaurants across all districts of Lima and many more throughout other cities in Peru. And interestingly, it's not specified to sort of one type of people or the other. It's not something that only tourists eat, or only Peruvians eat and tourists don't like, or that only rich people eat, or that only poor people eat. This is sort of a well-regarded type of food, and it's enjoyed by all socioeconomic levels across Peru. It's also, if you do happen to find a good chifa restaurant in Peru or in Lima, you may want to avoid going on Sundays, just because it is amazingly popular on Sundays, because one of the main aspects of chifa is that it has large portion sizes relative to other types of Peruvian food. And so this makes it a very popular choice for families who are getting together to eat, because you can then, share amongst the family and not have to buy so much. So I think for me, I'd be a bit nervous about trying chifa, just because I'm sure there's parts that would feel very familiar to Chinese food that I eat in America, but I'm sure there's other parts that would seem rather strange if it's using, ingredients that are only available in Peru, or just at least in that part of the world, and that I've never really come across before. And as I've said, I'm not the biggest of... I'm a picky eater, and trying new things is always a sort of, I want to, but then I don't think I'll like it. So then what's my fallback if I don't like it? In which case, usually around here in my hometown, it's where's the nearest McDonald's? But I would kind of really want to avoid that, not only in Peru, but just anywhere I was traveling, just to sort of avoid that whole ugly American stereotype of, they only want to eat American food and they won't bother to learn about the local language or local culture. And that's not me at all. If I was traveling, I would definitely want to know about the local culture, and I'd want to maybe not live like a local, but live like a local from just a different city in the country. Where I could come and be sort of touristy and be like, ooh, look at the thing I've never seen before, but at the same time not be completely 100% out of my depth, and not be sort of gawking and staring and open to all the negative that can come along with that. So I'm not sure about the chifa. On the one hand, sounds really interesting. Chinese Peruvian fusion. I have a bad history with fusion restaurants, sort of. They give me pause, because oftentimes it's not so much fusion as sort of, I'll go with food multitasking, in the same way that, they say you can't really multitask. You're only sort of doing one thing and then the other thing and then back to the first thing and blah, blah, blah. And that you aren't really doing more than one thing at once, and you're not doing either thing well. That's sort of my history with fusion, where rather than them taking elements from one and putting with the other, it's sort of, a lot of fusion restaurants that I've seen have really been sort of, we just happen to serve Mexican food and also Persian food. And I'm just like, but, okay, so there's nothing that you're mixing those together. You just happen to be a half Mexican, half Persian restaurant with a menu that's separated. I'm a little concerned about your ability to do one or the other of both of those types of foods. That's a little odd to me. So going to a real fusion restaurant, which is what chifa seems to sound like, I don't quite know how to be prepared for that. It's and it shouldn't be such a strange thing, because I know we have them in America. It's just evidently not really where I live, and or I'm too picky and I've never gone there before, and so my adventurous side only comes out when I'm outside of the country, evidently. But yeah, to go and try, Peru, of course, is on the Pacific Ocean, so a lot of it does also involve seafood, but it does still have similar things that you'd be used to here, like wonton soup and fried ragoons. I don't eat that one, so I've forgotten the name. I apologize. So it's probably a sort of an 80 to 90% similar. I think if you regularly or semi-regularly eat Chinese food here, you'd probably be like, okay, this looks mostly familiar, although one or two ingredients are a little, no, what is that? And I think you should definitely go into it, if not with a local guide with a guidebook, maybe, because again, part of the thing that appeals for Chifa is that the portion sizes are very large. So especially if you're going just by yourself, you probably want to know what's going to come out in like a portion size for like 3 people and what's going to be good for just me by myself to eat, and know before you go in. Definitely do some research on Chifa, but it sounds very interesting and close enough with the Chinese that I'm like baby steps of being adventurous and trying new things for me. So we're going to take another short break. Stay tuned. You're listening to the GSMC Travel Podcast.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
Welcome back to the GSMC Travel Podcast. The tip for today, and this is one that definitely appeals to me because I would totally be guilty of this, we'll get there. So the tip is to spend more time in fewer places. And that is because you will never, ever have time to see and do everything that it's possible to do, and maybe even everything that you wanted and planned to do. And that's just sort of the nature of traveling, and you kind of really need to be okay with that. And that would definitely be something I would struggle with because, again, this is all my wonderful imagination traveling. I haven't done traveling really any much. So I'd be like, oh, I finally get to travel. Okay, and I'm going here, and I need to do A through Z plus 1 through 28 plus, these other 16 things. And I would just, A, completely wear myself out, but B, that's not physically possible without, a time machine or a time turner or the ability to travel through time just on your own. Something Doctor Who would be like required or something. So definitely, it's fun to have plans to have a whole list of, oh my gosh, these are things you absolutely have to see or do when you're into your location here. It's also very fun to just sort of go spontaneously and just go wherever it takes your fancy, and then, you see something else going on, let's go down that street. Although please be safe when you do that. But just realize for either of those and for any way that you travel, things do often take longer than you expect them to, and longer definitely than you'd like them to. And so if you've got everything planned out by the minute, that's probably not going to work. Let's just, beyond even traveling, that's kind of just life. Life does not, A, care for plans, and B, doesn't super care for timing either. You want things to happen in a certain time, and life is just yeah, whatever, I don't care. So definitely be open, be flexible, be understanding, because it's most likely not the personal fault of whoever is having to tell you, the flight is delayed, or we can't find your reservation, or all tickets to this museum are sold out, or we close in 20 minutes and so we don't let anybody in. That's probably not their personal fault. They're just doing their job, and that's something they're required to say, often for safety, but also, for liability. And just be sort of flowish, and not in the flowish, like being caught up in something and not realizing that time's passing sort of way that's very popular right now, but just sort of go with the flowish. of if your plan didn't work out exactly the way you wanted, be open to something else happening and be open to the situation maybe not being as terrible as you think it might be. That maybe things not working out can actually work out wonderfully, if that makes sense. So the website for today is, I will spell it out for you and then explain it, ftlotravel.com. That's all one word, ftlotravel.com. And the letters stand for the love of travel. And this is it describes itself as a group trip company for millennial professionals, creatives, and entrepreneurs, or AKA a group travel for people who don't do group travel, which is me with my very much introverted self. On the one hand, I definitely want to be willing and capable enough to go traveling by myself and to not have to go with family or friends or on a group cruise or whatever. But on the other hand, that can be sort of lonely and you feel like you're missing out on things, especially in more social settings and circumstances and cities where there's a large social life and where it's very unexpected for you even to eat by yourself. There are certain countries and certain cultures where eating by yourself is seen as this really sad, depressing thing and not a sign of like independence, or you just, you have things to do and you're just grabbing a quick meal before you go wherever, but that all sort of meals or what have you are supposed to be done in a group of either friends or family or just comrades or what have you. To be by yourself is sad. And even if that's not how you feel, there are times when you're traveling and you see other people having fun in their groups and it's just like, that would be kind of nice to have someone else in the photo with me, to have someone I could go to do, see this place with, or go do this class with, or what have you. To do it by myself, you're never, it's hard to be by yourself when you're reminded that you're by yourself because other people aren't, if that makes sense. To be alone in a crowd is a very sad sort of feeling situation. So FTLO Travel designs and runs laid-back group trips for young professionals that are hassle-free, sort of like a vacation if you just want to go and chill out, but that also have adventure and cultural enrichment elements that you often find with people who do choose to solo travel. That it's not just, I want to go be a tourist, but that I'm really interested in this culture or this country or just seeing the world before whenever, and wanting to learn more deeply about the places they're in. So FTLO Travel is trying to do a mix of both in a group setting. You don't have to sign up as a group. That's not the idea of it at all. It's literally a group of strangers, not being led around like with a tour guide, but getting both the mix of, hey, we're all traveling together at fun times with vacation, but then we also have times where we can go off and explore more deeply in whatever about the local area tends to interest us. So each of the itineraries that FTLO Travel creates is designed to include unique activities and authentic cultural experiences while still giving you plenty of time to explore on your own. So it really is trying to be sort of the best of both worlds here as far as traveling goes, while at the same time providing you that social setting that you may not get on your own. And especially if you're one of those people who's like, you know what, I'm introverted, don't really want to go and talk to people. I'm definitely not going to set up a group travel on my own. That's just not going to happen. So it would be nice to sort of have this taken care of where we're all, in the agreement of, hey, we're going to wherever for however many days, and these are the things we're going to do together, and then these are the free times when I have to explore on my own, and to have that support system behind that without having to set up everything on my own feels reassuring. And I did check out the site. Unfortunately, I did not see a trip anytime soon to Peru at all, period. But I did see a trip coming up soon from this recording time, at least, for the destination for our next episode, which is Cuba. So I hope I will see you all then. Thanks for listening to the GSMC Travel Podcast. See you then.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Travel Podcast, part of the GSMC Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type in GSMC to find all of our shows from the GSMC Podcast Network. From travel to health and wellness to entertainment and life and happiness to sex and relationships. You can also follow us on Twitter and Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's episode of the Golden State Media Concepts Travel Podcast.